Okay, so it looks like you're getting the group means, but it is finding the F ratio and of course the p-value from the F ratio. I think you're okay with the p-value from the F ratio because you got this stuff down here, but we'll do it just to be sure here. All right, so you got the means right here, but we have some formulas that we're going to have to use to get this F ratio. And we also need the standard deviation for each of these groups. So I'll just do one example and then off camera I'll get the other two. So I'm just gonna, well, maybe it may not let me copy one at a time. I might have to copy all of it over to Excel. Here we go. There we go. All right, but each one's a group. So I'm gonna do, you've got the mean already, so I'm gonna do the standard deviation. And I'm just going to do that first column. And of course, there's that first standard deviation. So I'm going to do it, well, we're here. We'll just go ahead and do it for all the columns. S for the second column. And let's do it standDev.S for the third column. And of course, back here originally, you already had the means. So I'm going to write these down. So for our first group, the mean X bar 1 is 12.2857. We'll go back and get its corresponding standard deviation. Our second mean was 13.392886, and our third mean was just 15. Did that have no decimals? I guess it didn't. Okay. All right. So let's go back and get the standard deviations. So the first standard deviation was 2.659216. Second standard deviation was 2.13042. And the third standard deviation is 2.140872. Or I could have actually found the variance here since the formula calls, I believe, for the variance, but that's all right. We'll just square these to get our variance. Okay, now let's notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So our sample size for each group is 7. Okay, so I'm going to go back now and somewhere I have copied all the formulas we need right here. All right, so the first thing we need is a mean for all of our observations for all three groups. So let's notice that formula calls for us to do the sample size of the group times its mean plus the sample size of the next group times its mean and so on. And then we're going to divide by the entire number of things that we have. All right, so I'm just going to write X bar rather than trying to find the symbol for that. All right, so we're going to, on the top, we had 7 items in our first group. We want to multiply that times that mean. And then we had 7 items in our second group. Multiply that times its mean. And then we had 7 items in the third group, multiply it times its mean. And we're going to divide that by, since there were 7 in each group, and we had 3 groups, there were 21 items. All right, so we'll get that computation here in a minute. Now let's do the MST. MST, we want to take the first sample size, which was 7. And we are going to take the mean that we first had for the first sample size and subtract off this mean that we got from this computation right here. So I'm going to go ahead and get that answer. It is 13.55952. All right. And now, so we're going to do our 7 times the mean that we got for the very first sample was 12.28571, and we want to subtract the um, mean we got from the x bar computation up above right here. And then let's notice that we are then squaring that whole quantity. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing for the second sample. So we had 7 in our second group. Our second mean was 13.39286. We're going to subtract the mean we got again from up above, this answer right here, and square it. And then finally, we're going to do it for our third group. So we had 7 in our third group times our third mean was 15 minus 13.55952 and squared. And then all of this is the top. So I'm going to put that in brackets. We want to do all of that first. And then, oops, and then we want to divide that by k minus 1. Now, k is our number of categories, and we had 3 different groups. So k minus 1 is just 2. All right, so there's that. We'll do that calculation here in a minute. But our MSE, let's go ahead and deal with that one. We want to take our sample size of the first group minus 1. So 7 minus 1, it's 6. And then we want to take the first standard deviation that we got from our group and square it. 2.659216. And we're going to square that. All right, and then we want to do the sample size of the second group minus 1, which is 7 minus 1, so it's 6 again. And the standard deviation that we got from that group, and square it. And then let's take the sample size from the third group, which was 7 again, minus 1, that's 6, and its standard deviation, and square it. And of course, all of that is the top, so I'm going to put that in brackets. And we're going to divide that by, in this case, n minus k. Now, n is the total number of information that we had, and k was our number of groups. So we had 3 columns of 7, so that's 21 pieces of data. And then we had 3 groups, so 21 minus 3 on the bottom, or really 18 that we're dividing by on the bottom. Now, I will leave all this calculation right here up to you, but after you put those 2 pieces in your calculator, then our F statistic is just these 2 answers, the first answer divided by the second answer. And of course, you want to take out whatever answers you got, you want to take them out all the way decimal wise until you get to the very end calculation, and then you can round it off. And then once we have that F statistic, we are ready to plug it into Excel using the same values that, well, actually, I think in number 2 you used the inverse function, so maybe we'll just do a quick example of that. Let's, rather than, I'm going to leave that answer up to you, but let's just pretend that we got a value out of it, and we will use the value in Excel. All right, now before we can even put a fake value into Excel, we need degrees of freedom 1 and degrees of freedom 2. Degrees of freedom 1 is k minus 1. K is our number of groups. K minus 1. All right, so in this case, the number of groups was 3. 3 minus 1 is 2 degrees of freedom. All right, our second one is n minus k. N is the total number that we have. We had 21 different items in all of our stuff, and we had 3 groups. So it's 18. So we have degrees of freedom 2 and 18. And then we're just going to pretend that we got the value for f because I'm going to leave those calculations up to you and we'll put those into Excel. So we're just going to pretend, as I said. So we're going to do equal um, f.dist. And let's pretend that we had finished that computation and we had 13.33. I don't know. Degree of freedom for the first one was 2, for the second one was 18, and we're going to do true. And it gives us this right here. Now, this is always a right-tailed distribution. So since it's right-tailed, after we've done our p-value, we are going to go ahead and subtract it from 1 to get the actual p-value, or the left-tailed distribution. And that would be our answer. Now, of course, I made up an f-value. If you finish off, and I will tell you what you should get um, right here when you do these final calculations is 2.4155. 2.4155. So just make sure that you can get those out of your calculator, and so when you retry the problem, uh, you'll be doing things correctly.